Hey everybody, it's me, Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie. On this episode of CD Junkie, I'm going to be talking about the Osmonds in the 70s. You know, the Osmonds existed before the 70s and they existed after the 70s. In fact, the group itself, the Osmond Brothers, goes back to the early 60s when Alan, Wayne, Merrill, and Jay performed sort of a barbershop quartet type entertainment act. Now, there were two older Osmond brothers, Verl and Tom, but they were both hearing impaired and they were not part of the musical project, much to their disappointment. But of course, they were family, so they were always part of the Osmond Brothers. But as the 60s progressed, you know, they appeared on the Andy Williams Show and they became very popular. They put out a few albums. They were popular, I believe, in like Japan for a while. And then they introduced Donny to the act, and of course he's the cutesy one. Then they later introduced Marie as sort of a side project. In fact, let's call this the Osmond Brothers Universe, sort of like the Marvel Universe. You know, you've got the main band, which is the Osmonds, and they all have their own specific powers, and they go off and they do things separately from each other, but they always come back together and do something grand and wonderful. And then, of course, little Jimmy came along as well. He joined the OBU. But in the 60s, they were still this band that was just, they were entertainers, and they were just wonderful vocalists, wonderful performers, but they didn't have a specific style that was commercial enough to cross over into the charts. That is until 1970, when Alan, Wayne, Merrill, Jay, and Donny released the first Osmonds album called The Osmonds. Now, a lot of people say, like, oh, they were just, you know, the Jackson 5. Well, but no, I mean, look, you know, this wasn't like the Beatles versus the Stones, you know, the Osmonds versus the Jacksons. It was two different bands doing two different things. Now, if you listen to something like One Bad Apple, which is an incredible, still to this day, 50 years later, it's an incredible single. If you listen to that, you know, okay, maybe the comparisons to the Jacksons might be apropos, but the rest of the album is nothing like it. In fact, that first Osmonds album, it's got a lot of really cool songs on it. You know, One Bad Apple, of course, Sweet and Innocent is another huge hit off of this. And but then there's, you know, like Catch Me Baby, which was written by Alan Osmond, and you've got Flirtin', and you've got Would It Make You Think, and lots of really good songs, but they're all so stylistically different. It's almost like the label was saying, hey, let's just throw an album together of all these different styles, and whatever sticks, we'll run with that. And of course, One Bad Apple, Sweet and Innocent, there's two big things off of here. But I think that the second album, they really didn't have time to sort of work things out, because the second album, which is called Homemade, was pretty much sort of a carbon copy of the first album. You know, it has a song that sounds like Sweet and Innocent. It has a song that sounds like One Bad Apple. And it wasn't that original. It's probably my least favorite of the Osmonds albums. I mean, it's still spirited. Carrie's a great song, and, you know, Double Lovin' is a Osmonds by numbers, I guess you can call it. But it's still a fun album, and there were more songs written by the Osmond Brothers themselves, usually a combination of Alan and Merrill. But that was 1970 and 71 there. But the next album is the album that things really started to change, and that was an album called Phase 3. And boy, this is just a spectacular step forward for the Osmonds. If you think that they're all just bubblegum and lollipops, well, okay, maybe they are at some points, but Phase 3 was just, it just introduced rock to their sound. And they actually wrote a lot of songs, played instruments, and in fact, Down by the Lazy River, which is off this album. This is Phase 3. And if you notice, of course, they're all wearing these Elvis-type jumpsuits, and a lot of people say, oh, they're just imitating Elvis. No, they weren't imitating Elvis. These jumpsuits were actually designed by the same guy that designed Elvis's jumpsuits. So these aren't just copies of Elvis's jumpsuits. They're just smaller versions of them. But Phase 3, absolutely great record. Down by the Lazy River, which is actually written by Alan and Merrill. Then Business, and, you know, I have to admit that Business is not one of my favorite Osmond songs, but the rest of the album, things like Love Is, and they do a version of Joe South's Yo-Yo. Just go on YouTube right now, type in Osmonds, Flip Wilson, Yo-Yo. Greatest performance. Even though they're lip syncing, they do those dance moves. To this day, I can barely do these videos and have my mouth move and my hand hold up a CD, let alone the moves these guys make. It's just really fun to watch, and there's so much joy in it. If you watch any of the Osmonds things, there's so much joy in what they do, and I think that's really because people always paint them as the, innocent goody two shoes, and maybe they were, but you know what? Maybe that's what we needed, and maybe that's what we need now. Maybe what we need now is an Osmonds revival. I certainly think we do. But anyway, Phase 3 was a fine record. He's the Light of the World. They didn't write that, but that was the B-side, I think, to Down by the Lazy River, because I used to play that all the time. It's You, Babe, Don't Panic. It's not a super duper great album. That was to come, but it's a huge leap forward from the self-titled and Homemade. Also on the CD is the Osmonds Live, and if anybody's watched the CD Junkie videos, I'm not a fan of live albums, so I really don't critique them. But I do know that the band, when they recorded this, they all had either the flu or the cold, and some of the vocals had to be redone. But I haven't listened to it that much, so I apologize for not being able to review that. Let's talk about greatness. Also in 1972, you got Crazy Horses, which is an incredible album. It is so it's rock, it's pop, it's soul, it's country, it's everything. It is probably one of the greatest pop albums of the 70s, and I'm not joking. Now, when I say pop, I'm not comparing it to Zeppelin or anybody like that. I'm just saying this is just a great, full of great songs, great performances. There's a lot of heart and soul in this album. It's got songs like, of course, Crazy Horses, but Hold Her Tight is amazing with this great sort of Led Zeppelin riff. And Utah sounds like it could be Creedence Clearwater Revival. And Girls sounds like it could have been off of one of the first few McCartney solo albums. Yeah, this is just jam-packed with greatness. Crazy Horses, like I said. Lots of great rock songs on here. Great ballads, great country. It's hard to fault this record. It's almost a perfect record. It's so fun, so jam-packed with energy, rock riffs, and yeah, Crazy Horses. If you see it in the bins, if you see the CD, definitely pick it up. But if you see the LP in the bins, definitely pick that up. It's worth your while. It's worthy of this whole Record Store Day reissue, remaster, 180 gram. It's that good of an album. In 1973, they followed it up with The Plan, which is sort of a concept album based on their religion and the plan of life or something to that effect. And it's sort of somewhere in between the soft side of the Osmonds and that hard rock side. There are some good songs. It's just not as good as Crazy Horses. It's probably on the level of Phase 3. So, but, great songs in this. There's Movie Man, which very sort of Beatlesque, psychedelic almost. Let Me In, a great Osmonds ballad. Traffic in My Mind, which is a great rock riff, and it's definitely worth your time, but not quite Crazy Horses, but definitely something to love and adore. The next album is what we call the Pimp Phase, and that was 1974's Love Me For a Reason right there. Love Me For a Reason, it ties with the top Osmond's ballad. It is so amazing, and it's the song that taught me the word facsimile. And I'm sure a lot of you, if you were a kid back then, you heard the word facsimile for the first time there as well. But it's a cool collection of songs. Like Having a Party is another great song. Unfortunately, the label must have lost faith in the band because they went back to recording other people's material, but it worked on some of the songs. Like I said, Having a Party is a good time. Love Me For a Reason's incredible. Lots of great fun songs in there. I mean, there is, one or two songs there that are written by the boys in the band, but generally speaking, it's a nice album. It brings more funk into their sound. It still has rock. It still has pop. They're really showing their affinity towards funk and dance music on that album. And in 1975, out came the album called The Proud One in the US, and it was called I'm Still Gonna Need You in the UK. And this is yet another fine collection of songs. The song I'm Still Gonna Need You is tied with Love Me For a Reason as the best Osmonds related ballad. It is absolutely wonderful. One of those songs I can listen to over and over again in loop and never get tired of it. The album itself, again, funk, rock. It was a little difficult to pigeonhole them because they were always all over the map. It's great when a band puts out an album that has this great variety of music on it, but with the audience, sometimes the audience can't connect to the music, and it's difficult for them to go, well, where are the Osmonds? I want to hear One Bad Apple. I want to hear Love Me For a Reason. But when the band is doing a song like Boogie Down or something, which they did on the next album, sort of people kind of question that. But the band themselves is really showing their maturity and their growth, and but by this time people just thought of the Osmonds as a teeny pop band, and maybe that's what they were, but they were growing into something else. the public wouldn't let them grow. The Osmonds have often said that they thought that the Donny and Marie show sort of killed their career as rock artists. I don't think it was that at all. I think it was the public's inability to let them mature and grow as a band. I think that's really what hurt them in the end. But the Osmonds are a great band, and both of these are very, very fine releases filled with some great material. In 1976, the Osmonds introduced a brand new member of the Osmond Brothers Universe. That's right. They introduced Meryl's Mustache. Meryl's Mustache made the debut on the album Brainstorm, which is another fine record. It's got a lot of great songs on it, and they break out the funk again, and they break out the soul. There's a little bit of country, a little bit of... No, that was somebody else. I can't remember who did that. But anyway, I Can't Live a Dream is great, just one of the best Osmond singles. But there's other great songs on here. Walking in the Jungle is just kooky, weird, eclectic fun. Fantastic. Learning How to Love Again is great. At the Rainbow's End is great. In fact, I think that Brainstorm might actually be a better album than Proud One or I'm Still Gonna Need You as a consistent whole. But that's my opinion. By 1979, the Donny and Marie show had been on the air for a few years, and the band itself had taken a back seat to Donny and Marie because they were there supporting the family and putting the show together. Well, in 1979, they released another album, the last album of the 70s, called Steppin' Out. And I believe that Donny may have quit over an argument with Meryl's Mustache because there's no more Donny on this album. But yet it's another fun album, just like the previous Brainstorm. What's really kind of interesting is in the 80s, the Osmond Brothers, which was, of course, Alan, Wayne, Meryl, and Jay, they sort of continued in a country direction with a very final track on Steppin' Out is a song called Rest Your Love, and it's sort of signaling the direction that the band was going. It's also interesting that Would It Make You Think, which is the first song on the very first album, was also very country-esque. So they did sort of a full circle here, and that was very interesting. But remember how I told you about this whole Osmond Brothers universe, and different Osmonds had different superpowers, and they went off and did their own thing? Well, Donny, of course, was one of the most popular, and I'll quickly show you these Donny albums here. I won't go too much in depth because this video is already way too long. The Donny Osmond album, 1971, and To You With Love, Donny, 1971. I mean, what a busy time. Like 71, 72, 73. I think Donny put out 4 or 5 albums. The Osmonds put out 2 or 3. I mean, how do these guys find the time to breathe in amongst the tours and the television performances and the recording sessions? It's just amazing. Anyway, Portrait of Donny was 1972, and Too Young was also 1972. Alone Together was 1973, and A Time for Us was 1973. Boy, were these guys prolific. The album Donny was 1974, and the infamous Disco Train album was 1976. Ironically enough, the song Disco Train off that album is kind of the least disco sounding song on the album. But that is it with Donny Osmond in the 70s. I believe that there was one more album, Donald Clark Osmond, but I don't have that on CD. I don't know if that's ever been released separately on CD. And unfortunately, I was a big Jimmy Osmond fan. I had the first album, Killer Joe, but I don't own the CD. It's just way too expensive for my books right now. And I've only got one of the 3 Donny and Marie CDs, and that's the one with Deep Purple and New Season. I'm very glad to say, of course, Deep Purple is one of my favorite songs of the 70s, the Donny and Marie version. And that album also has Come On Marianne, which is another song, but I think it's the same version from Donny Osmond album. I think they sort of took songs and they sort of mixed them around like that occasionally. But it's also got a little bit country, a little bit rock and roll, and May Tomorrow Be a Perfect Day, which was the closing of all the Donny and Marie shows. There's tons of great Osmond compilations out there. Just a really good single disc one would be Osmond Mania. And this has tracks from the Osmonds and Donny and Marie and Donny Osmond and Jimmy Osmond. And it's just a great collection of music that you should all definitely check out. Like I said, the fact that the Osmonds are maybe sort of scoffed at, oh yeah, first boy band, but there were boy bands before, but the Osmonds were different. The Osmonds were a family, and they had highs and they had lows, And since the 70s, throughout the 80s and 90s, the band have had triumphs and tragedies, and but they're still a family, still together, and they still maintain that great family good spirit that we should all follow. I'm wearing purple socks right now in honor of Donny. In fact, Donny has a brand new Las Vegas show premiering just maybe this month, next month. So if anybody is passing through town, definitely check Donny Osmond. He has a brand new single. Alan has MS. He retired years ago. Wayne has retired. I believe Jay has retired. And Meryl's still out there performing. I mean, what we need more Osmonds in this world. Maybe there wouldn't be all this fighting and bickering, and maybe if we all just took a look back on the great things they did in this business, we would appreciate them more and put them on a higher level. They should win lifetime achievement awards with the Grammys and all that stuff. And they just did so many great things for the music business, for television, and they deserve your love and respect. But anyway, that's it. I'm done talking about the Osmonds. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and to ring that bell for future notifications. And until the next time, remember me, I'm Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie.